Hey guys, I thought it'd be really useful for you if, as far as learning compression goes, if I just went through a project file of mine, and actually this is like a mix down, it's not the original project file, but it's a track that I mix and mastered from start to finish, and basically go through the project, start with vocals and work my way down to drums and show you how I like to use compression. That way you kind of understand when and why and how to use compression when it comes to your mixes. And so this is a mix that I did, and if you look in the description below, actually, you can get my little mini course and you can get the stem files. You can get all these stem files so you can practice on your own, and you can watch me mix and master it from start to finish with my mini course. So make sure you check that out in the description. And basically what I'm gonna do is just gonna start with the vocals and then work my way down to the drums, okay? And so just a quick rundown of what compression is and the purpose. Basically, you can break compression down into, there's two reasons that we use it. One is to control the dynamic range of a signal. That's like the main reason we use compression. Two is just to shape the tone of a signal. So like, let's say that you want to make a snare drum punchier, you can use compression to do that. And I'm gonna show you all of this stuff during this little compression walkthrough. And so the first thing, I wanna go ahead and talk about vocals, because vocals, if you have a track and you're using raw vocals especially, you're 100% of the time, especially in EDM, going to be using compression on your vocals. I honestly can't really think of a reason why you wouldn't use compression. I guess if you automated the volume in a way to where it was really, really evened out, that could work. But compression, I like the way that compression sounds, and it's a really useful and easy way to basically even out the dynamic range of a vocal. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and play this vocal here. I'm just going to turn off. I only have one compressor because this is the verse and it's it's a little bit softer. There's not that much dynamic range going on. So I'm going to turn it off, and then I'm going to turn it back on, and then you can go ahead and take a listen. And I actually have a limiter of it here too, which kind of counts as compression as well. And so I will make sure to turn the stuff back on and show you what I did. But I'm going to play it. That way you can hear it without any compression. And I'll make sure to match the volume as well. And then I'll play it with the compressor on, and I'll show you what I did. So let's go ahead and take a listen.
I've been here before. Feels like nothing's changed. It's just a different you. The story's the same. Taking us in circles. Play it out like it's a game. We know how this ends. It's as certain as my name.
Okay, so what you heard there was no compression, and you can kind of hear the vocal sounded like it was coming like in and out of the mix. It just didn't really fit. Now let me go ahead and turn this compressor on. I'm not going to turn on this limiter yet. I'm going to just turn the compression on and take a listen to how it sounds with compression on.
I've been here before. Feels like nothing's changed. It's just a different you. The story's the same. Taking us in circles. Play it out like it's a game. We know how this ends. It's as certain as my name.
Okay, so you can hear that sounded a lot better. It's a lot more even. The vocal sits nicely up front, and it fits better in the mix. It's really as simple as that. And the reason I have this limiter on over here is because it's just catching a little bit of the peaks. This allows me to just place the vocal a little bit more up front in the mix, make it just a little bit more evened out. But I want to go ahead and just focus on the compression for now. So I've got a 4:1 ratio, and one thing you can think about with compressors is that a high ratio works well with high thresholds, and lower ratios work well with lower thresholds. So you can see I lowered my threshold quite a bit. And the way that a ratio works is basically for the vocal, every dB, so every 4 dB that goes above this threshold, only one is getting let through. And so that's how ratio works. And so basically I'm lowering this threshold, and as I lower the threshold, the vocal goes above it, and we're compressing the signal. And if you want to look more into compression, check out my mixing course as well. And I go a deep dive in compression. I don't want to take too much time on it. And I've got other videos where I talk more in depth about compression. But basically, yeah, we're lowering the threshold, and then we use makeup gain right here, we raise the makeup gain, because when you lower the threshold, it's, you're taking the overall volume, and like when it hits that threshold, it's turning it down, right? So it's going to get quieter, but then we take the whole thing and then it lifted up like this, and now it's evened out, and then it sits nicely in the mix. And so I use just a 1 millisecond attack time. When it comes to vocals, you can use a really pretty fast attack time and get away with it, because with attack time, that's just how quickly the compressor goes from being off to compressing, basically. And you want to be careful with fast attack times, especially on like things that have a lot of transients in them, like drums and stuff, or because basically if you have a fast attack compression, you put it on everything, anything that goes above that threshold is going to be kind of shaped down, like the transient will be toned down a bit. And it's a really quick way of kind of like taking the life out of your mix. Whereas if you have slower attack times and the transient can kind of pop through a bit, that pop, like the punchiness of it, then you can kind of compress while also keeping the life of your mix and not squashing the life out of it. And one day I'll probably do an example of this with just put fast attack compression on everything so you can hear it. But you don't have to worry about that with vocals that much, because there's just not a lot of transient information. So I got a 1 millisecond attack time. I kept the release time 30 milliseconds, which is like a medium release. And then I just raised the makeup gain. So the other thing we would talk about really quick is the knee function. I just left it the same. And if you want to take a look, you can visually see. So a harder knee, all the knee function does is basically it sets how quickly the compressor compresses once the signal goes past the threshold. I know that kind of sounds like the attack time, but it's basically, it's hard to even explain. It makes it, if it's a softer knee, it's going to be more gradual, where if it's a hard knee, it's going to be like a sharper attack time. And so if you want to visually see, a harder knee is going to look like that. A softer knee is going to be more of a rounded out like that. And so I usually just keep it somewhere in the middle. I never really go too soft of a knee, because then it almost kind of, it's like too transparent. I like to have kind of a hard knee, or, like just in between. And so for vocals, for this verse vocal, that pretty much sums it up. The way I look at compressing vocals is I pretty much will compress as much as I need to get the dynamics controlled. So you might end up stacking compressors. There's one way of compressing vocals is like a technique where you can stack compressors, do a little bit of gain reduction each time, kind of like what I did here, where I have the limiter on here. And so I'm compressing here, but then I felt like there was some kind of, I just wanted to control a little bit more. And what a limiter does is it's just a really, it's a compression with a really high ratio, like a basically infinite to 1 ratio. And so when I lower the ceiling, like it's like getting turned down and nothing's going past. So I just set that up to have like a few dB of gain reduction. So let's move down to some lead instruments, and I can show you how I've actually glued some stuff together, but also use compression to kind of make these pluck sounds pop a little bit. So let's go ahead and take a listen to what we're working with here. So I've got this glue compressor here. And what this is doing is I just have a 10 millisecond attack time, which is not too slow, but it's not too fast. And so it is doing some compression. What this is going to do, it's just tightening up because I've got these layers of plucks. This one's actually probably too quiet, but I've got these ones going on. And then this one. This is kind of like the main one that you hear. Try to lower the volume here a little bit. So the reason I wanted to compress this pluck group as a whole is to get that kind of glue, which basically means if they're all going through the same compressor, they're kind of essentially gluing them together to get more of a cohesive sound. But then also I can basically even out the dynamic range a little bit, because these plucks are an important part of the drop. They're like the main melody in the drop. I can compress them in a way that kind of keeps them up front and they don't get too lost in the mix. and they will make that kind of they will make it kind of pop a little bit. And I even have a compressor on this main lead pluck, and I'll show you what I'm doing here. So this might even be too fast of a attack time. To really hear the difference here, I'll put it on about a 30 millisecond attack time, and I'll take a listen, okay? So this is no compression. Now with compression. And compression is one of those things that it might take you some getting used to. You might not even hear the difference right there. But what I hear is that the pop, the initial poppy, plucky part of the pluck is just getting emphasized a little bit more. And that's what I want. So I want to use some slow attack compression and just have that pop through a little bit and also tighten it up at the same time. And then we have layers to this, right? Or levels to this. So then not only am I compressing it at the pluck level, but then at this level as well. And then we could also add a clipper on here if we wanted, but that's like a whole other video. But I just, I think it sounds just fine with the glue compressor on here, gluing it together and adding some punch and evening out the dynamics. And so that's the way that I like to look at that, especially for like a pluck instrument, something like that. So like if I turned off all the compression, let's turn this one off, this one off, this one off, and now the leads, this glue off. Let's go ahead and take a listen. Let's take a listen actually in context with everything else. Now let's turn them on. And yes, of course, we're going to be adding a little bit of volume with the makeup gain on some of these. So it might also just be a little bit louder, but take a listen to the difference now with the compression on. So there's definitely a big difference there. And like I said before, even in the dynamics, we're able to place it in the mix better, make those plucks pop a little bit better. So, I guess since we're there, we can talk about sidechain compression. And so sidechain compression is obviously huge in EDM. And with sidechain compression, most of the time we have the kick drum, we're sidechaining stuff to the kick. And this allows us to give that kind of pumping and breathing sound, that classic EDM sound that we like. But it also allows us to sidechain some stuff heavier, like lower the threshold more, and it's really going to duck down with the kick. Whereas some stuff we can have a little bit lighter, where it's still going to give it that kind of pumping breathing sound that we like, and it's still going to kind of add the rhythm and kind of make it just sound good, but it's not going to duck out completely like if it were to do something like this. So you can imagine, like if I have like this though, and then I have something else going on. Let's say I had some pads. I don't have any in this particular one, but maybe I could lower the pads more so that it's more kind of in and out, whereas it leaves the plucks more like less sidechained and kind of you could hear it a little bit more. That might be a way we can duck one sound, but while also leaving another sound and just, mixing it away so we can hear the plucks and then prioritizing the sound so we can hear the plucks and then have something else kind of being sidechained more heavily, which kind of pushes it to the background of the mix. Okay. So sidechain compression is pretty easy to understand. There's just the compressor. You click here on Ableton compressor, click sidechain, audio from, and then go find your kick. And then there's also ways that we can automate volume. And that's like a whole other thing. It's not really compression, but you can get that same sound by automating the volume that you do sidechain compression. I tend to use a lot of just regular sidechain compression because I feel like it has more of an organic sound than volume automation, but both work. And honestly, I should probably explore using volume automation more because I think you can get a little bit more nuanced with how you do that versus just using a compressor. And so let's go ahead and move on down to the bass. Okay, so with basses, I actually do some compression. I think I didn't even do compression on the basses. I do mostly just, in this case, I did a lot of, I did some side chaining, but I did like on the group level, some limiting and then clipping and then some saturation. And that's how I really evened out these bass plucks. So I've got this limiter here doing quite a bit of gain reduction, and if I go ahead and let's turn these off, we can maybe hear the difference. These are also being sidechained too, so that might be why it sounds like they're kind of coming in and out more. But the way I look at it, I like to use limiters on basses because it's a really easy way to like fatten them up, but also evens them out a lot. And it's like the bass is like the foundation of your track. And then the clipping, I just have this on here just to kind of chop off the peaks. And then I had the OTT. What do I do with this? And that is really just to kind of give this overall lift. I have the depth way down. OTT is compression, but it's also upwards. It's upwards and downwards compression. So the upwards compression is where it is taking the quiet parts and lifting them up, as well as turning down the loud parts. And so anyway, OTT, I don't want to get too much into OTT right now, but I use this more as like a colorizer and kind of a lift. And I don't use it that often. I don't put OTT on everything. I think that's another way to really mess up your mix is by just throwing OTT on everything. And then I have the decapitator tier, which will also control the dynamics of your track a little bit as well. Saturation kind of works like, it's not compression, but in a way it works to also control the dynamic range of your signal too. And so if I turn this on or turn it off, I like to really add some grittiness and then make it fattened up a little bit and add some, like gritty. And I like the E button on Decapitator quite a bit. And so that's what I did for not really compressing the bass, but limiting the bass in this particular case. All right, now lastly, let's go ahead and talk about this is how I like to compress my drums. And by the way, all of this stuff that I'm doing is how I like to do things. Feel free to comment how you like to do it, or if you see anything that you think I'm doing wrong. I'm always trying to learn. I'm not like, I don't know everything. No one knows everything when it comes to this. Mixing and mastering and EDM production in general is like a lifelong, you're just constantly learning. But anyway, so what I like to do, I like to group my drums, and I used to just take my kick and route it straight to the master. And I can do that now anyway, it wouldn't really matter. And then I would just have my drum group and then kick to the master, and then I can add like anything that I want to the drums. And I still do this, but I also sometimes, if I just put the kick at the top, I can then just highlight everything and then, either label this drum group 2 or percussion or whatever. And here's what I like to do. So I will typically just choose a kick drum and like pretty much don't do anything to it. The reason this stuff's on here is just because it's like a template that I had set up. And so I like to choose a good kick and then just leave it alone. The one thing I do, and I've been the one thing I have been doing more recently is I like to set up some New York compression, but specifically I like to boost the bass. So I'll do a heavy compression. This is parallel compression, by the way, so we might as well get that out of the way. But parallel compression, really quick, is where you have a really heavily compressed signal with a fast attack and then an uncompressed signal. And the reason you want to use a fast attack is because, like we talked about earlier, if you're really squashing the transients, then in this case, you want to squash the transients because you want to have the opposite effect of having the dry signal, which is there's going to be transients because there's no compression at all. And then you basically combine the compressed version in with the uncompressed. And there's certain mix engineers like Andrew Sheps, for example. I think he exclusively uses parallel compression on everything. And that's how he likes to do it. I'd love to see his project sometime, but I've never seen him actually do it, but I've heard him talk about it. But I like to do this for my kick drum, where if I have this kick here, for example, I like to, oh, I just realized I had some like automatic fade. Anyway, I'll worry about that later. But basically, I take this, if my kick is like this, that's gonna bug me. Okay, let me just skip ahead. Oh, that's just the way that when I'm playing it, it's doing that for some reason. Okay, no big deal. Okay. Anyway, so if you play this, now watch what I do. I'm gonna send this, send a return. I'm sending this signal, a copy of it, to this return track, and then it's sending it back. And it's gonna get a bit louder too, but it's also gonna be making a really, really compressed version. So take a listen. So it is getting louder, so, you know, obviously take that into account, but also it is giving me this like a really, really compressed version of the kick. It sounds like this. And so I can basically add that in, and it just creates like a nice, really thumping thump of a kick. So that's the first thing, so parallel compression. And then the other way I like to do parallel compression is by doing a audio effect rack. And then what I like to do, I like to use the glue compressor because we're gluing things together, and it's a fantastic compressor. And then I'll show you how to set this up. So I'm not going to run through the whole thing, but just so you know how to set this up, take a compressor, Control G, and then now go down here. And then if you right click and do create chain, now we have two versions of the signal essentially, and then you can label this dry if you wanted. And then you've got the compressed version, and now we heavily compress this one, and then we do the dry signal, and then we, you know, combine them, whatever, together, and that's basically how I got this over here. And then you can even add, you know, the New York style is like boosting the highs and lows, but in this case I just boosted the highs, and then I end up getting this. So I'll go ahead and go back and forth. So here's my drum group. Here's the parallel compressed version. So you can hear there's actually not too big of a difference there. Let's see, one more time. It's a little bit more subtle of an example, but hear things are kind of getting a little bit closer together, a little bit more aggressive sounding. I can hear that hat coming out more because I added that boost, but also because of the compression. And this is something that I heard, and I'm going to make a whole video on Steve Duda, founder of the guy who made Serum and Extra Records. He talks about doing the same exact thing, where basically, as far as compression goes, he'll route the kick, don't touch the kick, group the drums together, and then he'll even group like hats together, I believe, but then he'll process the other percussion elements just like this, all in one group. And this is how I like to do this. You don't necessarily have to do parallel compression. I like doing parallel compression a lot. You could also just compress, like throw a glue compressor on all of these drums together. Like if I just took them and went like this. Like if I just took and like went like this. Let's go ahead and take a listen. If I just put like a 10 or 30 millisecond, let's try 30 milliseconds, and then lower the threshold, do a quick release. Now if I see the makeup gain. Now let's do off and on, so no compression. Compression on. But you can see actually in this case what I'm doing is I'm getting most of that hat, so I have to lower the threshold quite a bit. Let's do more. In that case, that's actually making a difference right there. See, okay, listen to it off. Now on. You can hear it just kind of adds a little bit of emphasizing to the transients. It's also kind of making things sound like they're closer together. It's compressing them. So yeah, that's something else you can do. I like parallel compression quite a bit. And that's basically how I like to use compression throughout my projects. I might do multi-band if it needs it, but in this case, in this video, I just wanted to show you the most typical ways that I use compression in an EDM track or if I'm mixing a track for a client. And so yeah, that pretty much sums it up. I hope this was helpful. If you want to get the mini course on this, look in the description below. I also have a free mix training, and I can also mix and master your track if you want. Just go ahead, check out the description, look for all those goodies down there, and I will see you guys again in the next video. All right, see ya.